Thank you, Dana, for asking me to open the event for today. First of all, I would like to welcome all our friends and colleagues and clients for joining us today. Today we will discuss the hot topics on international taxation, and that is why we have decided to do it in English for a change. We will discuss questions like, can a dormant branch generate tax liability for me? When I register a branch, can that have retroactive effect to previous years? And also, for example, whether there's impact on the withholding tax when I have branches in Kazakhstan. So I think we're going to have a very enjoyable hour, and for sure I'm looking forward to it. So back to you, Dana, to open and discuss the webinar. Thank you.
Richard, thanks a lot. I just would like to mention that from time perspective, we plan to have it for 1 hour, and potentially the speakers will be, let's say, discussing the questions within 40 minutes to 50 minutes, and afterwards we hope to have a productive discussion with our guests as well. And I guess many of our guests know that, Richard, you are leading our international taxation practice, and maybe we can jointly try to find some solutions how to move further with the government negotiations, for example. Because for any consultant, it might be quite interesting when the companies have some questions, but indeed, even we as consultants would like to have a solution, because just having the dispute for the dispute's sake is not a good result for us as well. And referring to our speakers, so Aliya is helping Richard with developing our international taxation practice within PwC. She has around 13 years of experience. Nursultan is our leader in transfer pricing area. So basically all the disputes around transfer pricing and allocation of profit are dealt by Nursultan. And thus, it's our quite recent joiner from the State Revenue Committee and the Ministry of Finance of Kazakhstan, with 18 years of experience in the central tax authorities and local tax authorities at the management level. So I think we can discuss the questions both from theoretical point of view, like OECD guidance, Kazakh law, and especially the practice which we can see in the regions. I think many of us know that currently many countries are under the budget pressure. So I think Kazakhstan is not an exception. And I would say that we really see many of our clients struggling with the questions which Richard have listed in the very beginning of this webinar. And basically, Aliya, I think the first question should go to you. When we speak about the branches and the permanent establishment, I think we just should give a brief overview, like why we think this concept is important and why we do really have this concept in place. What does it mean for our non-resident companies in Kazakhstan?
Thank you, Dana. Hello to everybody, and I will try to explain in brief words, in very simple words, this concept of permanent establishment and why it's important. First of all, if we look on the Kazakhstan tax legislation, it says that non-residents, in principle, should be liable to tax in Kazakhstan in relation to their income which they earned from Kazakhstan sources. Such income may include income from provision of services in Kazakhstan, from sale of goods on the territory of Kazakhstan, some passive income, dividends, royalties, interest, which are earned again from Kazakhstan sources. And if we look on international tax treaties, and here I would like to mention that Kazakhstan is recognizing prevailing force of double tax treaties. We may use double tax treaty relief and exempt income of a non-resident or apply reduced tax rate if that non-resident doesn't have a permanent establishment in Kazakhstan. So we need to identify, first of all, whether PE, we call permanent establishment as a PE, whether PE exists or not. And if we look on various criteria of the non-resident may create PE. Such criteria includes having some fixed place of business in Kazakhstan, or performing services on the territory of Kazakhstan, and or conducting business via an agent. So this is quite complex topic, I would say.
Thank you, Ali. Just to summarize for those who are not really familiar with international tax issues. So basically, if let's say the UK company has some business in Kazakhstan, either they have registered a branch, or they regularly send the engineers to Kazakhstan, to do some measurements, for example, or you just have a rent of some premises, let's say in Atyrau region, and in all those cases, you would need to understand how permanent is your business in Kazakhstan, and if it is permanent, then we should say that the profit which was earned within this project should be really taxed in Kazakhstan. That's why it's really important to understand if you have created a permanent establishment, because this would mean the tax consequences, like additional cash outflow for your business in Kazakhstan. And we have seen that in quite many cases, especially with COVID situation, some businesses are suspended. And in many cases, like there is a foreign concept which people are trying to apply in Kazakhstan. They speak about dormant permanent establishment. And Alia, would you like just to clarify a bit of what is internationally understood as a dormant PE, and if we do have this concept in Kazakhstan law?
Thanks, Dana. I would say that from international perspective, dormant PE is mostly viewed as like cease suspension of activities in the country. While in Kazakhstan tax code, we have again this concept of dormancy, but this means suspension of submission of tax returns to the tax authorities. So if a non-resident applies for dormancy of its PE, of its branch, that means that that non-resident is still registered as a taxpayer in Kazakhstan, but it's exempt from submission of tax returns to the Kazakhstan tax authorities.
Yeah, so basically we can say that there is no 100% dormancy, from Kazakhstan perspective, And thank you, Ali. And Oljas, given your kind of such a long history with the tax authorities, what is the usual view of, let's say, local and central tax authorities on dormant PEs? Do they accept this concept, or do they still try to administer this type of sleeping businesses?
Thank you, Dana. Welcome to everybody to our webinar. So I hope this webinar will be quite helpful for you. So Dana, naturally the state authorities, they don't pay a big or much attention to these kind of dormant permanent establishments, because it's actually it's quite burdensome, it's time consuming, and actually it's but at the end of the day, it's not quite beneficial, because anyway this kind of activities is required to send some request to the foreign tax authorities, so it's quite time consuming. That's why actually the state authorities, tax authorities don't pay much attention to this dormant permanent establishment.
Thank you, Olja. So I think just the takeaway for our attendees is that even though if you have a dormant permanent establishment in Kazakhstan, still you should take into account that the tax authorities are not really in with this concept. And maybe you should try to understand if you have any risks associated with this dormant business in Kazakhstan, or any mitigation measures should be taken here. And I think from this point, we actually can move to the second question, which was mentioned by Richard, which is actually called like retrospective permanent establishment. And Alia, if you don't mind, I also would like to address my question to you. So for example, let's say in 2020, you are a non-resident, coming from the Netherlands, and you are providing services to me, but before that, let's say 3 years ago, you also had some businesses, but for example, with Richard, and could we say that today when you work with me and you register your branch, Richard still may have some problems because he used to work with you some time ago? Do you see any risks currently in the practice in Kazakhstan?
Thanks, Dana. I will provide my comments both from theoretical, I will say, from what law is required point of view, and from practical point of view as well. So if we look on the law, and I would here highlight that we have only 3 articles which say about taxation of non-resident which perform activity through a PE. And we have specifically Article 653, which says that if a non-resident created PE but didn't properly register that PE with the tax authorities, then the person which pays income to that non-resident, we call it tax agent, should apply withholding tax to income which it pays to the non-resident. Here we should, what we are saying that such an obligation to withhold should arise only after PE is created. So in our case, Dana, if you create PE, but you do not register, and I'm your tax agent, I'm paying income to you, I should withhold PE, and Richard shouldn't go back and apply withholding tax. But from practical point of view, everybody we know that the Kazakhstan tax authorities, I would say, are quite aggressively interpreting this provision, and they issued some notification to the Kazakhstan taxpayers and request them to go back and apply withholding tax to previous payments to non-residents which already created PE nowadays.
Mm-hmm. And here, I think it would be really important for our participants just to understand that the reason, maybe one of the reasons why we have decided to have this webinar is actually because of this aggressive approach of the tax authorities. Yeah, because when, for example, I start to plan my activities in Kazakhstan and I do work with Richard in Kazakhstan, yeah. So Richard, even myself, I don't know what would happen in 3-year perspective, yeah. And when the tax authorities are trying to say, well, you should have known it, yeah. It looks like they want to put me in a position of being a predictive person, yeah, just someone who can see the future, yeah, which is not possible. We even don't know sometimes what would happen in 1 year, yeah, what kind of contracts we would have, what kind of clients we would have. And now when the tax authorities are trying to have a back perspective and look backwards for 5 years and say, well, actually you have done a wrong action when you did not withhold the tax, and then they impose the fines and liabilities on the Kazakh entities, this puts the Kazakh companies in a position to be very aggressive with their foreign contracts. So, for example, if any of you who is attending this webinar used to have a business, let's say 2-3 years ago, and now the tax agents are coming back to you and say, hey, you know, the tax authorities want me to pay the tax instead of you, and they want to claim this money back from you as well. So it doesn't sound really logical, yeah, and it doesn't sound as something that you can administer, no like a company, like a foreign company, no like neither as a Kazakh company. And we think like maybe this should be something that we can discuss at the end of this webinar, how we should move going forward, because it seems to us that the authorities are really deaf. They do not want to listen to any logical or legal arguments just to understand that it's not possible to predict the future. That's why you cannot punish retrospectively. Well, thank you, Ali. I think this is really important point. And maybe the next point which we also should raise is like when, for example, a foreign company has, let's say, a branch in Kazakhstan, but not really enough employees to do the project, yeah? Or, for example, they have the engineers, but they have another project which is around marketing, if it's a diversified type of business. So in this type of cases, how much could be really attributed to the permanent establishment in Kazakhstan?
Mm-hmm. Well, again, from perspective of the tax code, we should look on the income which is attributed to PE and which is connected to its activity. And if we look deeply into the provisions of Article 7 of the Double Tax Treaty, which are concluded by Kazakhstan, when we identify what portion of income should be attributed to PE, we should look on such PE as a separate entity which conducts similar activity as the non-resident, and in addition to that, or commentaries to the OECD Model Convention requires us to make a functional analysis of the PE, look on its functions, risks undertaken, assets, and this will help us to understand what kind of profit, what portion of the profit should be attributed to that PE. While in reality, we do not see much cases when the tax authorities go in deeply during their tax inspections of branches or permit establishments of foreign companies. In reality, they think that any income which is paid to the non-resident should be allocated to the branch and should be taxed with the corporate income tax and the branch profit tax.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, Aliya, you have referred to the tax authorities, yeah?
Yeah.
And I think maybe that could be a right moment now, Oljas, to give the floor to you. So what would you say on behalf, no, not on behalf, like what would you say about the practice of the tax authorities? How do they consider the profit attribution to the branch, to the permanent establishment?
Yeah, I think Dana. So naturally, the approach of tax authority is quite simple, and they initially find any any provision in tax code or in tax convention or even in model on commentaries on model to model convention to find any provision to bring all this income of non-residents to the permanent establishment. So, for example, if the services is similar, for example, the permanent establishment render the similar services as a head office of non-residents in Kazakhstan. So that's why on this point we have a direct provision in tax code. So this articles 653, which says that in this case all income of head office should be consolidated into the permanent establishment. In this case, we have the direct provisions. But for example, when the services is not so similar, is like different. So on this point, the tax authority says that according to tax convention, we have Article 5 permanent establishment, and actually this Article 5 is not differentiate the services. So it's like treat all services as one point. As one article, yes. So that's why any service they try to consolidate to the permanent establishment and tax it in Kazakhstan. So that's approach of tax authorities.
Mm-hmm. So it looks like now structuring becomes even more important, yeah, because the tax authorities will not do the homework for the taxpayer in terms of like how much out of $100 should be allocated to Kazakhstan. So they will just take the approach that all 100 should be allocated. And in case if the non-resident company believes that this should be done otherwise, then all the proper mitigation measures should be done in advance. Because once you implement a model in Kazakhstan, and let's say in 2-3 years period of time, you change your model because you want to save some taxes and you want to apply the double tax treaty, the tax authorities may not share the same view. That's why I think structuring now is even more important than it used to be, let's say 3, 4, 5 years ago. Yeah. Dear participants, I just also wanted to mention that we have the chat option here. And in case if you would like to leave your questions, which we would be happy to discuss at the very end of the webinar, please feel free to do so. You can raise your questions in Russian or in English, whenever language is easier for you. And Oljas, I know that in December of the previous year, there were kind of a huge amount of the desktop like camera control notifications. And I know that many of our non-resident clients were in a position to appeal these notifications because for them, those notifications meant huge amount of taxes to be paid in Kazakhstan for the past or like previous projects. And can we say that appealing makes a sense today if we go to the tax authorities to find a new decision?
Yes, Dana. Actually, in any way, I think it's my thought that anyway, the appealing is the right way, because it doesn't matter what tax authority says, but anyway, the taxpayers have to stand on their position. But there's one feature, taking into account the specific of international taxation. Actually, all camera control or desk control is initiated on the central level by the committee, by the State Revenue Committee, but not by the regional tax departments. So that's why actually the appealing to the tax department, I think the regional tax department will not beneficial. I think this. Yes, this will not be beneficial for taxpayers, but appealing to the state revenue services, I think it might give some chance to taxpayers.
Thank you.
Yes, if the reasoning, for sure, if the reason is quite fundamental, if the reason is.
If there is a reasoning, yeah, I
Yes.
agree with you, yeah, but maybe just one thing to remember is that actually we cannot go directly to the central authorities, yeah, there is a certain hierarchy. So first, if we got the notification from the city, we have to go to the region, and only after the region we can go to the republic level, yeah. But at the same time, I think also one of the grounds like why we have decided to make this webinar with the support of the embassies, it looks to us that there should be a proper dialogue between the business and maybe with the support of the embassies, because now, given the budget constraints, I would say across the globe, yeah, so it's really important to find the balance, because in many cases we see that some of our clients are really at the edge of the bankruptcy because you cannot get the payment from your clients, yeah, and you got additional assessments from the tax authority. So basically it would mean that the business has no any cash for the further development. That's why is a kind of right balance is really important, especially in our times. And Alia, I think it also would be important to cover the passive type of income, yeah, like dividends, interest, and royalties. Can you see any trends here as well?
Yeah, sure. Dana, before I respond to your questions, I would also add on Olja's comments. Yes, if you believe that no income should be attributed to your permanent establishments, please go with the appeal, prepare defense file, prepare arguments why such income should not be attributed, make such functional analysis, explain everything, and like fight for the right not to tax such income. So Dana, in respect to your question about what if we are paying, what if, for example, you are a Dutch tax resident and I am paying passive income to you. So if you look on article in the tax code, Article 667, which deals with the automatic application of double tax treaties to passive types of income. It says that I should ensure that you are a beneficial owner of such income, and that you provide me with the your tax residence certificate. This article is silent about existence of permanent establishment. So that means that if you have a branch in Kazakhstan, I don't care. I should apply the double tax treaty, but and should apply reduced tax rate to your passive income. But in reality, this is not the case. And in reality, we should also understand whether you, Dana, created permanent establishment or not. And if we look on the double tax treaty, for example, the double tax treaty between Kazakhstan and the Netherlands, And if we go to the specific articles which deal with passive types of income, for example, the dividends, I should clearly understand whether the holding to which my dividends, which I distributed to you, is related to your permanent establishment in Kazakhstan, whether the branch is like performing some holding activities in relation to me. Or if, for example, if you provided a loan to me and I'm paying an interest amount to you in relation to that loan, whether the debt claim is related to your branch in Kazakhstan. If the debt claim is related to the branch, to your Kazakh branch, I cannot apply reduced tax rate under the double tax treaty. I should treat such income within the Article 7 of the double tax treaty, and I should understand whether such income should be allocated to your branch, to your permanent establishment in Kazakhstan. And if so, then I should apply withholding tax rate at the rate withholding tax at the rate of 20% to your income.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Aliya. I think just few points to add from myself. As I have mentioned, in December 2019, there were quite many cameral control notifications, like remote control notifications. And we have seen a number of cases when the tax authorities were telling that, well, actually, interest should be attributed to the permanent establishment, like a branch or just a tax permanent establishment, or like dividends, for example, if in Kazakhstan you operate through the legal entity and simultaneously you have a branch and you have one person who is both is the board of the legal entity and is the head of the branch. So they were trying to say that actually the person who is leading your permanent establishment has an opportunity to influence on the LLP decisions. That's why you cannot apply the reduced withholding tax for these dividends. Or there were questions on the royalties on like a complex franchising license. So where we were speaking about like people who were coming and supporting implementation of this IT product. So there were a huge number of various questions on the passive income. Some of the appeals we were able to win. And this was, I think, especially a trend for the loans when we have shown if there was or no connection with the permanent establishment. But overall, there was a big amount of this type of questions. That's why we kind of called you for some actions and some reflection in this area as well. And I see in chat, Richard, by the way, I also have shared the questions with you via WhatsApp because I host this meeting and I can see the questions. So the question was if this all applies to the representative offices. I think for the representative offices, we just have to mention that from Kazakh civil law perspective, the rep office is not actually doing business. So they are not engaged in the real money generating activities. Rep office is just someone who represents your business, can do some marketing, but not really revenue generating activity. So if this is the case, then usually profits should not be attributed to the rep office. But if someone has a rep office officially, but in substance is generating some revenue from via, let's say, this rep office, then it becomes a normal permanent establishment with all the profit attribution risks and liabilities. And I think all the other questions kind of will be considered a bit later, but I just wanted to provide this clarity to one of our participants. And I think now we are moving to a very much interesting area of transfer pricing law. And I think now we can give the floor to Nursultan. Nursultan, when we speak about the head offices and the permanent establishment, how the TP law should be applied, how should it be applied in line with OECD standards, yeah, and how it works in Kazakhstan? Nursultan, you are muted.
Sorry. Good afternoon, colleagues. It's a very interesting topic. Thank you, Dana. The transfer pricing law says that transactions, it provides only a specific list of transactions which are subject to control, which is called international business transactions. Basically, it includes export-import operations, transactions of non-residents on provision of services and works between resident of Kazakhstan and non-resident which haven't established permanent establishment in Kazakhstan, and transaction of residents of Kazakhstan made outside of the territory of Kazakhstan. So basically, these transactions, the list of international business transactions does not include operations between head office and its branch in Kazakhstan. Therefore, if we will just look from the requirement of the domestic transfer pricing law, it seems that these operations are not subject to TP control.
Mm-hmm. So just to summarize, what the international law says, like if we have a permanent establishment and head office, are these relationships subject to transfer pricing control?
Yes, it's a very good question. That if we just look on the transfer pricing law, it says that there is no any rules how to control this transaction. At the same time, we have a provision in our tax code, and we have many double tax treaties which says a bit differently. So they say that tax code, the tax code says that income of permanent establishment should be determined taking into account transfer pricing legislation. At the same time, transfer pricing legislation is silent how to control these operations. But at the same time, also like double tax treaties says, Article 7, for example, says that profits P is expected to make profits if is in a distinct and a separate enterprise engaged in a same or similar activities under the same or similar conditions and dealing wholly independently with enterprise of which is a permanent establishment taking account of provision of the TP legislation. So it means that the branch should earn as much as money as if it could be like earning it without the help of the head office. So it means that double tax treaties assume that the control should apply on these transactions, but it's again referring to the domestic TP legislation, which doesn't provide any mechanism on how we should control these transactions and how we should calculate the profit which permanent establishment should have in Kazakhstan. Mm-hmm. So there is an ambiguity in the legislation.
Yeah, but I would say in the ideal, let's say OECD world, the permanent establishment should be considered as a separate taxpayer, and if there are any transactions with the head office, so they should be on the arm's length based principle.
Yes, it should be considered as a separate taxpayer, but should be considered as a separate enterprise, and its income should be calculated as if it acts independently from the head office. On its own, like based on its functions, based on its assets and risks it has in Kazakhstan. For example, if it's a branch of, for example, I don't know, Dutch company, we should separately look at that branch separately. What it is doing, how many people it has, how many assets it has, and what income it may earn if it will be acting independently.
Mm-hmm. And Rustam, from your own practice, can we say that Kazakh tax authorities are ready to consider all these concepts, or do they have overall any interest in the transfer pricing area? Do they ask for the benchmarks and any vision?
As you know, the president said in a very recent speech on the 1st of September that the transfer pricing control should be strengthened. And the tax authorities are now considering options how they can make a better administration of transfer pricing. And given that many taxpayers should submit local files very soon, and tax authorities will obtain a lot of information from the businesses, how the business model works, how margins are established, and how companies are justifying their profits now. I think given all this information they will have very soon, I think they will prepare a new set of questions and they will challenge how some business model works if they will, for example, will not agree on this. And in terms of operation between the head office and the branch, I think overall the tax authorities were using the approach either it should be 100% or it should be zero. So they haven't split any income so far based on the functional profile of the branch. So they haven't attributed specific income only, based on the branch's activities. They're trying to attribute as much as possible.
Just to sum up, yeah, and I think Nursultan, you have made a very good point, yeah, on local files. For those who maybe are not really familiar with all the deadlines in Kazakhstan, on 1st of September, by 1st of September, all the
31st December.
No, so 1st of September, all the international companies who work as a group, they had to file an application mentioning that they are part of the group. And if they fall under certain conditions, like on amount of the transactions. And afterwards, before 31st of December, actually, the local files in Kazakhstan should be submitted just to show all the breakdown of operation and decision-making process. And indeed, trigger some additional questions, yeah, like how much should be attributed to a Kazakh PE maybe, or to the Kazakh legal entity, which is a part of a bigger group. And I think we also can share, and I see that there are some guests who are coming from the oil and gas industry, and they have already felt that the tax authorities are strongly practicing transfer pricing law, like Kazakh version of law, in terms of the export and transfer pricing. And it's not always in line with international standards, because all related and unrelated parties are under the transfer pricing control. And the other trend was control over the mining industry, so the same approach as with the oil and gas. And then there was a big question mark on loans, especially intra-group loans, when you have to understand what is the margin you would like to apply, LIBOR plus how much. And the other interesting question, I think, Nursultan, which we have recently received within one of the inspections within FMCG sector, was actually a request for the benchmark, right?
It's full TP documentation, which includes also a benchmarking study. And very interesting point that despite the deadlines which are established in the transfer pricing law and the tax code, the company was requested to provide this data within a week.
Yeah, so it means that it should have been ready within the enterprise, and that it's, even though the law says 90 days, so the tax authority with the inspection have a different timeline, so it's better not to sit on a bomb, right, and have a prepared documents. Oljas, maybe you can share a view here. I know that the Ministry of Finance was putting some reservations in the OECD commentaries, and what is the position of the Kazakh authorities, Kazakh Minfin, on this matter?
Anna, you mean allocation of profit to parent establishment?
Yes, to this one, and if you have any ideas on transfer pricing, that also would be good to hear.
Yes.
Like maybe some introduction, yeah, what this reservation means for the country and for the tax, and if this could be used in the practice.
Yeah, so just as a brief introduction, what is a reservation? So initially, in OECD model convention, each country can reserve their position. So, for example, Kazakhstan have some reservations, several reservations, and for example, one of them concern royalties. So on royalties, Kazakhstan says that we also treat payment for the leasing of equipment as a royalty. So that's why the other countries, they can see our position. So, for example, in future, some countries would, if some countries would like to conclude some convention with us, so we'll know that we treat this payment as a royalties. But unfortunately, Dana, according to this point, there is no any reservation from the Ministry of Finance of Kazakhstan. And as much as I remember, in my practice, there was only one case, and then the one taxpayer, the big transportation company, actually use this approach for the Kazakhstan branch. So they make some guidance and some approach when they divided the whole income between the Kazakhstan and Russia. But this is the only case that I remember from my point.
Okay, thank you, Oljas. It looks like the tax authorities from one side are trying to be in line with all the OECD initiatives like BEPS, MLI, and we have several questions on our chat on this matter. And from the other side, they are trying to, as much as possible, to ensure that a certain portion of profit is actually allocated to Kazakhstan. Yeah, from one side, this may be right, yeah, decision of the tax authorities, but from the other side, we are 100% sure that there should be a balance of interests. Yeah, because we all understand that from certain point of view, the country is also dependent on the flow of the international. Like external investments to the country. Just as closing remarks, Aliya, Nursultan, Oljas, maybe you would like to express some ideas how the taxpayers should be behaving in this type of situations, and any mitigation measures, any solutions?
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Dana. So I would repeat what you said, and Nursultan also mentioned. If you are at the beginning of structuring your activities in Kazakhstan, please structure your activities well. Look whether your activity will be quite permanent to the country, and if so, please think about registering your PE in Kazakhstan. If it's like temporarily one-off, probably it's better to supply your tax agent, the Kazakh taxpayer, which pays your income with all relevant information, so that your Kazakh tax agent may justify non-application of withholding tax to your income. If you are already in a position of, I would say, defending non-application of tax to your permanent establishment or to your income, please have a look on your activities. Please have a look on your functional profile, on the functional profile of your permanent establishment. Collect all relevant arguments, prepare the defense file, and go to and explain everything to the tax authorities.
Thank you, Aliya. Nursultan?
Given that we are finalizing many local files right now, and we understood that many groups, even big ones, haven't prepared this document before. It is the first time they have started doing it and starting contacting the groups internally, and realizing that many transactions has some justification, that price is calculated based on some principles. We strongly recommend to make this homework as soon as possible, just to get in contact with your groups. Maybe you have TP group, TP teams in the groups, and have proper justification and some documents, at least some defense file, internal defense file, just in case the tax authorities come to you and start asking questions, because to collect all this data within like short notice, like a week or even 2 weeks, it is not possible. Sometimes it takes 6 months to collect some, like what documents the group has and what the position of the group was taken, like initially when this type of services or transactions were set up.
Nursultan, thank you. Aliya, Nursultan, will just Richard and myself, we have shared with you the questions which we have received in chat. So I think once Oljas will be sharing his final view, maybe you can just have a look to those questions. Please check your mobiles. Oljas, any ideas which you would like to share?
Actually, as Aliya said, the structuring business is the best way not to be safe in terms of taxation, but naturally, and also you could consider make some provision in your contracts in order to be safe and to provide some, I don't know, some provision on reimbursement in any case. So I think this also could be beneficial for you.
And from my side, I would like just to share a final comment. Currently, we are supporting a number of inspections with our clients. And one of the most popular questions now is on inter-office charges. So basically, especially for multinationals, the tax authorities are trying to understand what kind of expenses were allocated to Kazakhstan And I think this also is important for the branches because there could be some general and administrative expenses, for example. And for all those questions, there is a need to see the backup documents. Yeah. So, for example, if there were some reports, studies, I don't know, advices. So these all should be supported by the documents. So you cannot just have an act of acceptance or like an email, which would say, well, here you have a £100,000 invoice. And that's it. So there should be a whole story behind, yeah, and this all should be supported by the documents. And the other maybe question which would be asked is how the transfer pricing actually worked in this situation. That's why, as we have mentioned, maybe inter-office transfer pricing and profit allocation to the branches would be something that you would like to consider yourself or with your consultants. And I think now it's a time to have a discussion around the questions which we have received. Guys, I have shared with you the questions, and if you would like to pick up any of those questions, you are welcome to do so.
Maybe, Dana, before we go to the questions, I want to correct an omission on my introduction, and it is actually to say thank you to some other colleagues that have helped us set up this webinar. You mentioned them already. These are some embassies. So I think thank you to the British Embassy in Kazakhstan, to the British Chamber of Commerce in Kazakhstan, to the Chamber of Commerce and Industry of France in Kazakhstan, to the Trade Mission to Kazakhstan under the Embassy of Austria, as well as my own embassy, the Dutch Embassy. So I just wanted to make sure that we correct this, because thank you very much for your support, as always. Then maybe going to the questions, and maybe I will kick it off, and please, colleagues, feel free to add. Let me see, let me try to read. So I think the first question you already addressed, Dana. Then problems with audio. Okay, so the other one is we are operating through a in Kazakhstan through a resident company, so we don't need to be bothered by permanent establishment regulations. Yes and no. Principally, yes, you will indeed be governed by the Kazakhstan Corporate Income Tax Act, and all the income and all the deductions will be in your local entity. However, I think, as we heard earlier, there are some connections if the local entity pays passive income, for example, abroad, but there is another permanent establishment of the group in the country, or of the entity, the parent shareholder, then that may have an impact. So you do need to be careful. And also, I think it is important that, because that is what I see a lot in my practice as well. A group, they have a local Kazakh entity, so they think, okay, we don't need to worry about other things. But actually, when other companies within the group, so sisters and affiliates, starting having their own activities in Kazakhstan, they can create still a permanent establishment. Or even the parent company of the local entity, when they do other things in country, they can also create a permanent establishment. So I think it's always important to keep that in mind when dealing with Kazakhstan or any other country for that matter, whether or not this could create a PE, or whether you have properly structured it via your local entity if you have one. Maybe I'll pause there. I don't know, colleagues, if anyone wants to add anything.
Maybe just to consider the dependent agent concept, right? Like when, for example, a Kazakh legal entity has an authority to negotiate on behalf of a non-resident, then obviously this Kazakh entity can create a permanent establishment of a non-resident company.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, maybe to move on. Well, this is, I think, more question to you, Dana, if I may, about have we successfully appealed tax notifications on the basis that income should not be attributed to the branch or the permanent establishment? Or in general, maybe how successful are we in our tax dispute practice with these type of issues?
Yeah, Richard, I will follow your way. The answer will be yes and no. Yeah. So there were cases where we have managed to successfully negotiate at the level of the State Revenue Committee, and one of the solutions was actually sending the request to the other countries, like within the exchange of information procedure, which is provided by the Double Tax Treaty. It was in several European cases. And in particular, we have won the cases which were on allocation of interest from loans to the branches, because the loans were on behalf of the head office. So here we won the cases. Plus, when we went to the court, we have been able to win the cases on the procedural grounds, because it's also really important how you wrap up, let's say, your claim, yeah, and how you react on these desktop control notifications. But obviously, there were cases where we could not help our clients. But as Ali and Oljas have shared, it's really important from the very beginning to make a very careful structure.
Okay.
Then I would like to add here that 3 years ago, there was a campaign in our region, like about 21 taxpayers have received under tax inspections, and we helped many of them to resolve all these tax inspections, like in favor of these branches, because like we managed to justify that the general allocation were correctly done by the branches.
Yeah, indeed, they were like G&A allocation, yeah, some administrative expenses of the head offices were allocated to the branch. But I think we also should take into account that the conditions are changing. Yeah, like 3 years ago, there was no such deficit of the budget. Well, while now I think it also influences the decision-making process.
Dear colleagues, I see 2 questions in the chat, and I would like to briefly comment on them. And in my view, they are quite related. The one is related to the MLI. Another one is about beneficial ownership test. So, if I may, Dana. So, we have, historically, we have beneficial ownership test, which was applicable to the passive income when the passive income was paid to the non-residents. And in that case, a tax agent should have to ensure that the non-resident is a beneficial owner, that the non-resident has a right to own, dispose income, and it's not an intermediary, it's not an agent, or it's not like a nominee holder of such income. Starting from 2018, such concept, such requirement was introduced to the Article 666, and this article envisages automatic application of double tax treaties if we are paying active income. For example, we are paying for provision of services. And at the same time, the double tax treaty, Article 7 of the double tax treaty is silent about beneficial ownership requirement if we are paying non-passive income. If we are paying for provision of services, if we are paying for international transportation or other types of income. So we were quite active in a discussion with the tax authorities, saying that there are so many business structures, business activities where there could be some intermediary, for example, freight forwarding services. And freight forwarder is in his active business, that function is like related to the organization of shipment from point A to point B. Definitely freight forwarder is not a shipper, is not performing transportation services on its own transport. And the result of such discussions is right now with the in the draft law, which includes amendments to the Kazakhstan tax code. This draft law is in the Senate right now, and this beneficial ownership test will be limited only to the situation when we are paying income to related affiliated parties only. So if we are paying service income, we should understand whether that related party is a beneficial owner or not. And the second amendment to this Article 666 is that if we are paying income to the non-residents, and the MLI should affect the double tax treaty between Kazakhstan and the country from which that non-resident operates, then we should also make sure that income we are paying is included into the non-resident aggregate annual income, and the effective nominal tax rate is not lower than 15%. So all these amendments were done, are planned to be implemented in relation to the recent ratification of the MLI by Kazakhstan. And here I will also add that recently in September, we conducted a series of webinars on MLI, and those webinars are available on our YouTube webpage. You can easily find them if you go to our official webpage of PwC Kazakhstan. That's all from my side.
Yeah, and I think there are like 2 last questions. Maybe Nursultan, you would be better placed, yeah, to respond.
Just a second.
In terms of allocation from expenses from head office to branch, this one.
It is, if it's allocation of profits from head office to its branch, as we discussed previously, we recommend to have a TP documentation to confirm that this allocation, we obviously it has no any markup, but in this case, tax authorities are checking if it's related to the branch and it's not duplicating the same, duplicating this it's not duplicating expenses which branch incurred in Kazakhstan 2 times. So it's from the head office level and the branch level. So I think from transfer pricing perspective, if there is no any markup, for example, there could be some artificial markup on transfer from head office to the branch. If there is no any artificial markups, then it shouldn't be any issues unless it is related to the Kazakhstani activities and it has proper documentation. Again, given it's our countries and our tax authorities are formally driven, they will require all documentation to support your position that it is related to the branch activities.
And Oljas, I think you will to respond to the question.
This is quite an interesting question. Yes. So the question is, I would always recommend my clients to avoid go to PE. Better to go for a local company, work and costs are the same, and this solution gives me an umbrella to protect the mother company. So actually, yes, from this perspective, you're right, because the mother company is quite safe. If there is some tax liabilities for Kazakh company, so tax authorities could do nothing for the mother company. But in terms of taxation, and actually having PE is quite beneficial because despite this local expense, you could also deduct some G&A. We call G&A expenses of the head office. And actually, tax conventions give a right to the non-residents to deduct this, to additionally deduct to the permanent spending the G&A expenses. So it might be, for example, salary of the board of directors, a salary of accountants, or some G&A expenses of the head office. Just I would like to highlight it is an expense of head office, so it's additional expenses, additional deduction.
Okay, Olja, thank you, Richard. I think we have exhausted all the questions within this time frame, yeah, and there are some few questions which still, I guess, waiting for the response. Maybe we can directly contact these people.
Yes, I think so as well, Dana. Thank you. I think maybe to add to Noor Sultan's reply on the allocation of expenses, in general, you need to do this at arm's length and have not. I think with labor, so with people, there might be, it might depend on how you have structured that relationship. There might also be a case where this could be structured as a secondment. And then the allocation of expenses is limited, as we know, or at least the markup. But anyway, maybe it goes too far to discuss this in detail. I would like to thank my colleagues for speaking and doing this webinar with us. I would like to thank our dear friends, clients, and colleagues to join us today on this webinar. I think at least I had a very interesting afternoon. I hope you feel the same. I think we will share a summary of this webinar with everybody attending, and you can always find it on our YouTube channel of PwC Kazakhstan. So for now, thank you all very much. Thank you for joining, and have a very nice day. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Have a nice day.